CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. It's Thursday, November 10th, 2022. I'd be remiss if I didn't start off today's show. Tomorrow, Veterans Day. Typically in November for the last few years, I've been doing something called Veteran November. Unfortunately, this year, I've just been so busy. I haven't had a chance to do that. And I want to apologize to all my fellow vets for that. I also want to thank them and thank the many men and women who decide to enlist and join our armed services to defend our nation. You are the best this country has. Selfless, brave, amazing individuals who define this country, define everything this country stands for. And so with that being said, to many of you that tomorrow will be honored and celebrated on Veterans Day, from one vet to another, happy Veterans Day. Take some time tomorrow, say hi to a vet, and just thank them for their service. I mean, we don't look for thank yous are very awkward for vets, I will say that. But still, you know, it's the basic courtesy, and you know, coming after an election season, it's always nice. Veterans Days right after election day, typically. It kind of reminds you that it's not about, you know, no one goes to the service and says, I will not stand next to a Republican or I won't serve next to a Democrat. We don't really care who you voted for or what you support. We know that we're defending our nation. And so that's why that's so important. So take some time this weekend and remember that. And remember those men and women as well that are in our lives, past, present, and future, that have decided to enlist. Folks, yeah, that was my rant for this morning. Make sure to subscribe, cyberhubpodcast.com, all the latest YouTube, your favorite podcast listening platforms. Go find us, CyberHub Podcast, subscribe, share our show with your friends, colleagues, and everyone else. That'll be great. Let's grab my morning espresso before we get into today's show, because a lot to talk about critical infrastructure here on the onset after the midterms and what the next kind of geopolitical challenge is going to be for many of us practitioners. Coffee cup cheers, folks. Many are still reeling from Patch Tuesday. Nonetheless, APT29, a Russian group, has been exploiting a Windows feature to compromise EU diplomatic entity networks. The APT nation state actor has been leveraging a lesser-known Windows feature called credential roaming following a successful phishing attack against an unnamed European diplomatic entity. The diplomatic-centric targeting is consistent with Russian strategic priorities, as well as historic APT29 targeting, according to Mandiant. The espionage group known as Cozy Bear is known for its intrusions aimed at collecting intel that align with the country's strategic objectives. It's believed to be sponsored by the SVR. Some of the adversarial collective cyber activities are tracked publicly under the moniker of Nublium, a threat cluster responsible for the widespread supply chain compromise through SolarWinds in December of 2020. This specific credential roaming mechanism allows users to access their credentials in a secure manner across different workstations in a Windows domain. Investigating its inner working further, Mandiant highlighted the discovery an arbitrary file write vulnerability that could be weaponized by a threat actor to achieve remote code execution in the context of the log victim. If you don't think this goes back to SolarWinds, you're mistaken. It's why what happened on SolarWinds, and I said it then and I'll say it again now, there's nothing that anyone can do there's so much that we need to do as a community. Let me rephrase that. There's so much that we need to do as a community to recover from SolarWinds. No different than what the financial industries had to do since Equifax in 2017. The same thing. The victims, the people who are having to deal with the after effect, isn't necessarily SolarWinds. The companies that were part of the SolarWinds supply chain compromise, like Microsoft and many others, they're the ones that are having to deal with it. That's what we're seeing here. The new StrelaStealer malware is stealing Outlook and Thunderbird accounts. The new information stealing malware is actively stealing email account credentials from Outlook and Thunderbird, two widely used email clients. The behavior deviates from a most info stealer, which attempts to steal data from various data sources, including browsers, cryptocurrency wallet apps, cloud gaming apps, and the clipboard. The previously unknown malware was discovered by analysts at DCSO SciTech, who reported it that they first saw it in the wild in November of 2022, targeting Spanish-speaking users. In one example, the ISO contains an executable that bundles malware via DLL order injection. And a few other cases here, something to keep in mind and definitely look to blog. What starts in Spanish will end up in English, folks. There's a high-severity flaw that's being reported in critical systems used by oil and gas companies. Researchers have disclosed details of a new vulnerability in a system used across oil and gas organizations that could be exploited by an attacker to inject and execute arbitrary code. The vulnerability tracked a CVE 2022-09-02, a CVSS score of 8.1, is a path traversal vulnerability into ABB total flow computer, and remote controllers. This kind of goes a little bit more to what this does, because a hack can prevent utilities from billing customers. And this is made by Swiss industrial technology firm ABB. They're affected by the serious vulnerability, and this is widely used across the industry. Researchers showed that an attacker with access to a targeted flow computer can bypass authentication, use brute force attack, and then exploit a path traversal vulnerability to read the device's shadow password file to obtain its root account password. The same vulnerability can be used to modify the SSH configuration file to enable password authentication and allow an attacker to access the device with root privileges. The entire exploit chain can allow a remote unauthenticated attacker to execute arbitrary code with root privileges. The hacker can take complete control of the device, disrupt its ability to measure oil and gas flow, which can prevent the victims from billing customer. This goes to the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, which targeted its IT and billing system. That's why they shut down the pipeline. And that was kind of the beginning of the rise of fuel here, because, well, it just was. And now you kind of see more of this here in the target, which leads to this story. As a practitioner, I was reading this last night, and it's something I have to say. There's a huge rise in the cost of cyber attacks that's sending insurance policies cost to double and triple in most cases. Now, whether to buy or cover is a tough decision for a lot of companies. The story here talks about Lloyd's of London finding problem in its IT systems, kind of talking about the Lloyd's story, and going through the cost of insurance then to the cost of insurance now, but that's across the entire industry. And here's where the challenge lies today. A lot of companies, we're seeing massive layoffs in the tech industry. We're seeing massive layoffs in a lot of other places. Retail organizations aren't hiring the same way they used to hire for other holiday seasons. This holiday season, you're not seeing these part-time seasonal roles as much. They're trying to get more done with their current staffing levels, realizing that they're only going to bring people on when they really, really need it. And that's simply because inflation, the cost of living, and the cost of doing business has all increased, and the cost of goods. So people are going to be spending less money. And with that being said, companies are cutting back, and cyber insurance rates are going up, and CISOs are going to have to answer for that. Cybersecurity professionals are going to have to answer for it. And this goes into the risk-based approach. And this risk-based approach was that we relied too much on cyber insurance being a carrier. We have to deal with way too many legal regulations, which increase the cost of a cyber breach rather than reduce the cost. And what we end up spending money on is more legal and compliance work rather than really shoring up our IT systems. Hence the exception of what you're seeing at Equifax, that had to revamp their entire infrastructure after the 2017 breach. And what Jamil and his security team have done at Equifax is nothing short of exceptional in that time period. Well, this cyber insurance is no different. These rates are going up. CEOs, CFOs are asking CISOs, do we really need this much coverage? And this is where there needs to be an honest conversation. If we're cutting down on our workforce, if we're reducing our budget, if we're increasing our technological landscape and our attack surface, but then we're reducing our spend, yes, we're going to need it. However, if we're trying to shy away and we're doing the right work around security, there's a discussion to be had there, and there's some positive ROI with that. This is so important right now, because cyber insurance policies rates have doubled and tripled in the last 12 months, folks. They have. If you haven't seen it, go talk to your insurance agent. They'll let you know all about it, folks. That's it for our show today. We'll be back with a whole lot more on Monday. Tomorrow, Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day to all my fellow vets. To all Americans celebrate these brave men and women who decide to volunteer and put their lives on the line for the sake of our freedom. To all of y'all, happy Veterans Day. To everyone else tuning in here, thank y'all for being part of this awesome community here at CyberHub Podcast. Looking forward to talking to y'all again on Monday. Until then, happy Veterans Day. Have a great rest of your day, and most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.